Welcome back to Questing Beast. I'm Ben. Today we're going to be taking a look at Swords and Wizardry Complete Rulebook, which is a retroclone of old school Dungeons & Dragons, written by Matt Finch and published by Frog God Games. This particular copy was given to me as a gift after I played with some of the Frog God people at a recent convention. So I think this is the first full-on retroclone that I've really made. Most of the other games that I've looked at have been more recent OSR stuff. But Swords and Wizardry goes back quite a ways. Here's what our back cover looks like. And this is a retroclone of original Dungeons & Dragons rather than something like Advanced or BX D&D. It's not a perfect replication of original D&D, and it's not really intended to be. Instead, it takes most of the rules from that system, cleans them up, makes them much more comprehensible, and presents them in a format that's much easier for people to use. It also includes a lot of possible house rules and other options to make it a little bit more palatable for a modern gamer. We have a great cover here by Errol Otis. Take a look at what we have inside. Complete rules by Matt Finch. The art throughout, I'll talk about the art as I go on through it. It's very variable. Some pieces I really like, and there are other pieces that I'm really not into at all. I feel that in general, it could actually have used possibly less art, in the sense that if you had some pieces of art that don't feel like they're strong enough or don't have a strong individual style or view that they're writing from, I would probably have removed them and just kept the really good pieces of art. Just commissioning a lot of pieces that may not be as up to par as some of the other pieces creates this kind of varied look that I'm not really into. But the content of the book itself is quite good, as we'll see. Creating a character, we have a section on rolling your attributes. It's rolling straight down the line, 3d6. Of course, you can switch things up if that's what your game master wants. We have what all of our different abilities do. Strength, dexterity, constitution, all your normal stuff. And what you may notice is that the bonuses are extremely low. So for example, if you have dexterity here, basically the possible effect that you could have on missile fire is anywhere from -1 to +1. And that's very typical of old D&D, like original. The bonuses were very low. Things were kept very tight. You didn't have these large swings possible with how good your characters were. Same thing with strength. So your 2-hit modifier, if you had a 18 strength, the biggest to hit modifier would be +2. So things are kept in a much smaller range than we see in more modern D&D and even in modern OSR games. We have the assassin. We have a run through of each of the character classes. So this is an example of a piece of art that I really like. It has a lot of character. It has a lot of flavor. The artist clearly has a vision for what they're trying to do, and I think communicates it really well. We have the cleric, all your typical old school D&D classes with a bunch of other ones like druids, and Wolf Fighter is a typical one. You got your magic users. You got your monks. So you have some classes that definitely were not in original D&D. So these were brought in later editions or in later supplements put out for D&D. But they've definitely been adapted so that they fit with the power level and the rule system here. Your paladin, your ranger, your thief, etc. Now, one thing that it does that also separates it from original D&D is that in the original game, you had race as class, which meant that if you were a dwarf, you were just a dwarf. A dwarf was a class that you played. So this takes a more modern approach, which allows you to combine a type of fantasy creature, like a halfling, an elf, and so on, with a class. So you have that combo that most people are used to. I think that's a smart move. Most people are used to that, and it allows for more customization of what your characters are like. Got some rules on multi-classing, alignment. Alignment is strictly law or chaos, which is very original D&D. It harkens back to a time when the alignment was not a personality write-up. Instead, it was an actual alignment, meaning it was like an allegiance. Who were you aligned with? Are you aligned with chaos or are you aligned with law? And those are actual forces in the universe. They're real things. So it wasn't about your personality. It was whose side you were on. And that adds an interesting world building element that I really enjoy. We have equipment here with your different types of missile weapons, melee weapons. You got armor over here. You have rules for weight and movement. By and large, probably too finicky for most people to use in the sense that it actually talks about how many pounds you can carry. And it's hard to find a group that is really into tracking that. So you might want to switch to something more slot-based, like you can carry a number of objects equal to your strength or something like that. And how to play. Now, one thing I want to talk about before we move on is that although all of the rules for creating a character are summed up, in pages 7 through 32, I really feel like a summary would be very helpful here. For example, when I played Swords and Wizardry at the recent convention that I mentioned, it wasn't a big deal for me to make a character. I know the tropes. I know basically what I'm looking for. So I was able to flip through the book and sort of make a character in a very short amount of time. But for a brand new character, it's a bit problematic because there are things that are really scattered around. So you roll up your stats on one page, and then all the different things that you fill in on your character sheet, right? So you think you'd just be able to go straight through your character sheet, but a lot of this stuff are all found on different pages. Like, where's my hit points? What is my saving throw? What is my armor class? I have to look at the equipment and figure that out. I have all these different types of different bonuses here. Those are found on different pages. And there's just a lot of flipping back and forth to figure everything out. It would be nice if there was a summary page or two that had all of the steps all there with references to where you should go in what order. I think that would speed things up a lot for new players. Going into how to play, it's pretty standard D&D. If you played D&D before, then playing Swords and Wizardry will be a piece of cake. Saving throws, there was a unified saving throw used particularly in Swords and Wizardry. So there's just one number. I'll give you an example here. So you got your monk, and the monk has a saving throw from 15 down to as low as 5. And what you're trying to do is roll higher than that number to make a saving throw. It keeps things very, very simple. We have a combat system, and the official system is a phase system. So first you check for surprise, and then everyone declares spells. So you have to declare spells ahead of time. Then you roll initiative, and then everyone moves and shoots. Everyone does melee combat and casts spells, right, that you prepared ahead of time. And spells can be fizzled if the spellcaster was attacked before the spell goes off. And then the round is complete. So it's a little bit more like the types of phases you would see in a war game. And that, again, harkens back to original D&D. Although there is, very interestingly, a number of alternate ways to do combat, right? There's 3 alternate ways to do it bundled together in this book. There's very much a toolkit approach to this, where he shows you a whole bunch of different ways that you could do this and allows you to pick an option that works best for you. This method right here is the simplest one. It's where you just roll for the side initiative, and then each side can move and do all of their stuff. Then the other side can move and do all of their stuff. That's the way that most people play, I have found. We have attack tables. So the way that OD&D worked is you actually roll on tables to figure out how you hit things. So for example, if you were a fighter, paladin, or ranger, then you would use this table. You look at what level you are. So say you are a 5th level character. So you look right here, levels 4 through 5, and you're trying to hit someone with armor class of 2 because it used descending armor class. And then you would just look at the intersection. You need to roll a 15 or better in order to hit that person. Now, what's really nice about Swords and Wizardry is that it has both descending and ascending armor class. So it has descending up here, and then it has in brackets ascending. And what's really great is that, especially in the monster part in the back, it actually includes both values every time you see a monster. So there are people who are actually much more comfortable with descending armor class, and they want to stick with that. But for players who are relatively new to the hobby, ascending usually is much more intuitive, and this has the stats, so you can use that right away, whichever one you prefer. Specific situations in combat, turning your undead, healing and morale. And there's a great multi-page example of gameplay, which I really like. So entering a dungeon, trouble develops, traps and loot, and so on. So it's not abstract. You can see much more concretely how an old school version of D&D would play out. High-level adventuring. We have things like strongholds. Strongholds are coming back, especially what with some new Kickstarters that are coming out soon. And a lot of people are interested in those once again. But those rules come all the way back from original D&D. And we have some overviews on how to do that. We have your spell lists. Magic user spells, cleric spells, and druid spells. Magic user ones go up to level 9, level 7, and so on. All the spells are much more terse than you would see in something like 5th edition. There might be a little bit more interpretation required by the game master to make them work, but that also encourages players to use the spells in a more creative fashion. When spells are really rigid and precise about exactly how they work, then that tends to limit what players are going to do with them. I'm moving through here, past our magic. We have designing the adventure, and because this is OD&D based, it assumes mostly dungeoneering. That's what OD&D was designed for. Symbols for mapping, what an actual dungeon would look like, how to fill in the map key, how to assign monsters to different levels in the dungeon. Because how old D&D worked is that the level of the dungeon more or less corresponded to the level of the monster. So the deeper that you went, the more dangerous things were going to go. So you had a lot of control over how much danger you want to put yourself in by how deep that you went into the dungeon. So there was a lot of risk and reward mechanic kind of built into the very structure of the game. Looking at wilderness encounters, lots of great tables for what type of place are you in, right? Clear terrain, are you in forests, are you on the high seas? So what type of monsters would you want to use? So you can easily generate that sort of stuff as players travel around. We have rules for mass combat and siege combat, which are often neglected, and even aerial combat, which as far as I know, I've never seen used, but I'm sure someone has, and ship combat. We have a bestiary in the back covering all of your basic D&D monsters with the classic, very tight OSR stat block, keeping things very easy to read. And as I mentioned before, armor class comes in descending and ascending form. Got all your monsters here. We got rules for treasure and the different types of magic items that you're going to find. It's all kept very classic and fairly simple. So as opposed to the sort of things that you would see on like the Goblin Punch blog or in Into the Odd, where there's a lot of super flavorful magic items designed to encourage problem solving, these are kept fairly simple. Of course, adding a lot of those innovations from more modern OSR stuff would be very easy. Magic armor and weapons, mostly +1, +2, +3 weapons. Although the classic trope is that when you have a +1 weapon or higher, those swords are often sentient, which can add a lot of character and personality to the game. Some unique magic swords, remarkable magic items, and so on. We got a character sheet in the back. Although I believe there's quite a few alternate character sheets you can find online, especially ones that are drawn by fans, that add a lot more texture and flavor to the character sheet. And there we go. We've got an index at the back, and we have what are probably Kickstarter backers, I believe. So that is Swords and Wizardry. It's a great way to get into actual OD&D if you want to play a version of the game that is very similar to that. Because if you actually pick up the pamphlets from original D&D, I believe the PDFs of that are pretty straightforward and cheap to find. It's almost impossible to understand how the game was supposed to be played. The original version of the game was very inscrutable. It assumed all sorts of knowledge on the part of the reader that was often not the case. So if you weren't a wargamer from the Midwest at this particular time, there's a lot of things in original D&D that don't make a lot of sense. And a lot of things were just left out and skimmed over when they should have been fleshed out more. So Swords and Wizardry makes that much more accessible, while adding a lot of rules and tweaks that make it much easier to play, including things like ascending armor class and how to just run it like you would run modern D&D, where you roll a d20, add a bonus, and you try and get over an armor class. Most players find that much easier to pick up. So as usual, where you can get Swords and Wizardry will be down in the description below. And join me next Wednesday when I will be looking at Death is the New Pink, which is a hilarious name for a version of Into the Odd that looks at it from a more Mad Max perspective. This crazy wasteland full of nutcases all trying to kill each other. And before I go, I have to make sure to thank all of my patrons from Patreon, especially Wallace Baker, who has pledged at a high level and is doing an awesome job at keeping the channel fueled up and roaring ahead, looking at all the best OSR stuff coming out on the scene today. So that's it for this review today. Thanks for watching, everybody, and I'll see you guys next time.